Hello my dear viewers, and welcome to my first ever instructional vlog style video where I'm going to teach you how to make makgeolli. I was inspired to make this video because a few of my friends expressed interest in learning how to make it, and makgeolli is one of my favorite things to make and one of my favorite things to drink, so I'm very happy to be making this video to share some of my knowledge. So a little bit about makgeolli. It is a fermented rice wine. It is a Korean drink. It was originally a peasant's drink, so the farmers would make it. And it is very popular in Korea, and almost no one knows about it in North America. And I think part of the reason for that is because it's not able to be shipped overseas and internationally just because of the shelf life and the carbonation and the fermentation. So you're kind of in on a secret here. So you can buy it here if you go into the LCBO or the SAQ, but to me that bottled stuff is just a completely different drink. The bottled stuff has this very sweet aspartame flavor to it. It just feels and tastes very different than the home, fresh brewed stuff. In terms of the taste profile of the stuff that you make at home, it's kind of hard to describe because it's, like many Korean foods, it's definitely an acquired taste. And the first time I tried it, I felt like I'd never tasted a kind of alcohol that tasted like that at all. I would say it has a similar mouthfeel and texture to sake, because it's a little bit on the thicker side, so because it's made with rice, right? And in terms of the taste, to me, I would describe it as tangy, as sweet sometimes is a little bitter, and definitely having this kind of full body mouthfeel. Like it's thick. It has, I don't want to say silty, but it is ricey in some way. Some people have described it as like yogurty, kind of. I don't know if that's fully accurate, but it's the kind of thing where you'll just try it and be surprised. When you bottle it, you'll see it separate. So there'll be like a bottom kind of white, silty bit, and then on the top will be this clear bit. And that clear bit is soju, if you distill it and filter it and put it through this whole process. I've never done that. I don't know how to do that, and also personally I like makgeolli better than soju, but if you're interested, you can also do that. In terms of the alcohol content, again, I've never personally measured that myself, and I think it's kind of a difficult process, but let me know if you do end up finding a way. Yeah, I know it's between like 5% and 20%, like 18-20%. I would say anecdotally, for me drinking it, it feels kind of similar in alcohol percentage to wine. Sometimes like a little more and sometimes a little less, depending on how late you leave it to ferment. One of my favorite things about makgeolli is that it's so simple to make. You need 3 to 4 ingredients, and it takes 1 to 2 weeks to be done, start to finish. I want to shout out my dad, who taught me everything that I know about makgeolli and who inspired me to start making it, so thank you, Appa. I hope that this has been informative and insightful, and I hope that it inspires you to actually make a batch. It's one of my favorite things, honestly. It's so good, and it's traditionally enjoyed with food and with people, and yeah, usually when I make a batch, I rally the troops and I invite them all over and we drink all of it. So I hope that you have a similar experience too, and I hope that it lasts a little longer for you. But anyways, with that, let's get into the video. So to make makgeolli, you're going to need some glutinous rice, sometimes called sweet rice. You can find this at Asian or ethnic stores. And I bought a 6.8 kilogram bag, I think for like $45. So this is your biggest expense. There's 2 kinds. There's like a long grain one and a short grain one. I go with the short. This is nuruk, which is a fermentation starter. So nuruk is a mixture of bacteria, yeast, and enzymes, and it contains amylase, which is the enzyme that breaks starch up, and it turns it into sugars. You're also going to need distilled water, which I just go out and buy in 4 liters, and yeast. You are able to use fancy brewer's yeast like my dad does. You can also just use instant yeast. You're going to need a scale, a kitchen scale, and some steaming equipment. Personally, I prefer the bamboo steamers. You can do metal steamers, or you can also do the Instant Pot. If you're using the bamboo steamers, you're going to need some cheesecloth. You are also going to need something to brew in. So I use my ongi or hangari, which is like a traditional porous clay pot. In the past, I have brewed in the water container that I bought water in. A lot of people also use jars. And you just want to make sure that it's a container that does not seal. Forgot to mention this earlier, but you're also going to need a fine mesh bag to strain out the makgeolli, but you could also probably use the cheesecloth. So here are the proportions that I use, but feel free to halve them or even quarter them. First thing you need to do is wash the rice a ton. Wash it more than you usually would if you're just cooking it. I usually end up washing it probably 10 to 15 times. And so the key here is that you want to try and be gentle with it. You don't want to break any of the rice grains or else you're going to speed up the fermentation. So try and be as gentle as you can. Don't grab it or anything. I just lightly pushed around. I'm going to show you this technique that my dad showed me where you keep the water running the whole time and it kind of flows out the sediment. Then you're going to soak it overnight. You can also soak it for like 2 or 3 hours minimum, but personally I like to soak it overnight. So I'm going to show you a few different ways to steam your rice. If you do it in the Instant Pot, this is my least favorite way just because I find it oversteams it somehow, but you know, you put some water in the bottom, steam it for I would say like at least 15 minutes and then just keep trying it. Just test this out. I don't know. I haven't really experimented too much with this. For the metal steamers, I always wash them beforehand, pour some water in. I pour boiling water to give them a head start. Just make sure that the steamer doesn't touch the water. You're going to fill the steamer baskets up. You can fill them up pretty high, I found. And if you want, you can poke holes in it to make the steaming more even. For the bamboo steamers, you're going to line it with some cheesecloth and do the same thing. And then I put them on for 30 minutes, check after 30 and see how they're doing. So the way that I check if it's done is I just try it. I try it maybe at the 30-minute mark and see if it's crunchy, then it's not ready. But the key here is to cook your rice al dente. You don't want your rice to be gummy or wet. You want it to be very dry. So when your rice is done steaming, you're going to take it out and cool it down. And we need to cool it down so that when you mix it all together, it doesn't kill the yeast. So to speed this process up, I usually spread it out on to parchment paper and I let it cool. To make the process go even faster, I put it outside when it's cold to cool it down even better. Here's a sneak peek of my apartment. And my roommate Jackie. Huh? So now it's time to get your scale out and measure out all the ingredients. So you're going to need the yeast, the glutinous rice, the nuruk, and some water. So I'm measuring out the proportions here. Now for some people, they soak the nuruk in the rice beforehand for a little bit, or they just mix it in with the water. I think that's kind of smart. I mean, I don't do that, but the reason people do that is because the rice absorbing the water with the nuruk in it is the delivery mechanism for the nuruk and the yeast. So it's kind of smart to soak it if you want. So yes, I do a lot of zeroing here to make sure that everything is measured. And then usually I just mix everything together. I just put the rice in honestly in whatever order. Sometimes water first, sometimes rice first. Make sure to wash your hands before. For this step, you are going to use your hands because the key here is breaking down all the clumps and basically making sure each grain of rice is separated. So just gently mix it, don't crush it, but just make sure there's absolutely no clumps and that everything is distributed. Then you're going to put the lid on. Again, don't seal it. This is really important. Do not seal your container. Some people put a little cloth over it. And then you're going to put it in a dark and ideally warm place. So after the first 12 hours, let's say the next day at some point, you're going to check on your makgeolli. And don't be afraid if you see that it's super dry, but that's good because the water has absorbed into it and that's what's going to help it ferment. So you are going to mix it. Use a silicone. I would not recommend using your hands for this because your hands will smush it up too much. So you can see I use a silicone spatula to just mix it a little bit and make sure it's distributed. You're going to mix it once every 12 hours for the first 2 days. Personally, I don't always mix it every 12 hours. I often just mix it once per day for the first 2 days, and then I leave it, but it's up to you if you want to mix it just a little bit. So how do you know when it's done? Well, there's a few different ways to tell. So one way is that you'll start to see 3 different layers. One will be kind of a clear top layer. There's going to be a second rice layer and then a third rice layer. You'll just kind of see like 2 to 3 layers. So once they've separated, you can finish it then. Another good way to check is just taste it and see if the rice is mushy or not. If the rice is crunchy, it's not done yet. Another way is listening to see if you hear bubbling. If the bubbling's done, that means the fermentation is over. And another way is just trying it to see how you like it, how you like the taste. I find the time it takes to brew is variable. It also depends on the temperature of your room. So when you decide that you want to bottle your makgeolli, that your batch is done, you're going to take a metal strainer. I take a metal strainer for the first little bit and I kind of just toss it around like a pancake. And then I usually transfer it to a fine mesh bag where I squeeze it out. You can also just use the mesh bag from the start. I just use the metal strainer because my hands get tired from doing all the wringing out. But yeah, so you're gonna be left with just a little bit of this stuff. That's just amazing to me that all those ingredients, all that rice turned into just this tiny bit of leftover stuff. Whenever I finish a batch, I love to host a little thing to have my friends over to try it and enjoy it. So here's me re-straining again, hosting a hot pot. I find that if you take it out earlier, it's more tangy and it's more bitter. And the longer you leave it, both before you filter it and after you filter it, I find the sweeter it gets. But that's the really beautiful thing about makgeolli is that the taste profile can change so greatly with time. So here's me putting it into a bottle. Again, you might have to burp these, i.e. release the pressure from them every now and then, depending on how carbonated it is. So just make sure you check on them every now and then. Mine don't usually have that much pressure. I like to mix it with, well, ice cubes, honey, Sprite is a favorite. Fruit juices. I don't know. You could do all kinds of stuff. Mix it with things.
Or drink it straight!
So yes, just enjoy with friends, and if you have any questions, you can contact me. Everyone I know who's gonna make this has my contact already. And if you don't have my contact, you can comment. Thank you guys for watching, and yeah, I hope that this was helpful, and I hope that you enjoy your brew. Bye!